Clint Eastwood insulted Muhammad Ali's mother on live TV. Ali's reaction shocked studio. Ali had knocked out Sonny Liston, defeated Joe Frazier, and stood up to the United States government. But when Clint Eastwood said something about his mother on live television, everyone in that studio braced for the worst. What Ali did instead became the most talked about moment in Hollywood that year. It was October 17, 1975. The Merv Griffin Show was broadcasting live from Los Angeles, and the producers had pulled off what they considered a booking miracle. Muhammad Ali, fresh from his legendary Thrilla in Manila victory over Joe Frazier just 2 weeks earlier, and Clint Eastwood, whose Dirty Harry franchise had made him the most bankable star in Hollywood, were going to share the same couch for the first time in television history. The two men had never met publicly before that night. They occupied completely separate universes of American celebrity, one the undisputed king of sport, the other the undisputed king of cinema, and the combination felt electric and slightly unpredictable in the way that only truly live television can. Merv Griffin had been hosting his show for 11 years. He later said that in all that time, he had never felt more nervous before a segment than he did walking out to introduce these two men. The audience felt it too. The applause when Ali walked out was the kind that shakes walls. When Eastwood followed 30 seconds later, the energy in that studio shifted into something that had no precise name. For the first 20 minutes, everything went exactly the way television was supposed to go. Ali was Ali, fast, funny, impossible to ignore. He described the Frazier fight in such vivid detail that people who had watched it live felt like they were seeing it for the first time. Eastwood was sharper and more self-deprecating than most people expected, matching Ali's rhythm with a dry wit that surprised the audience. Griffin leaned back and let them talk, which was the smartest thing he could have done. Then Eastwood made the comment. It came out of a discussion about training discipline. Eastwood had mentioned the physical demands of his own film shoots, the early mornings and the stunts and the months away from home. Ali had been nodding along, and then he said that nothing in film could compare to what a fighter goes through to prepare for a championship bout. It was friendly sparring, the kind of competitive upmanship that two alpha personalities fall into naturally. Eastwood smiled, looked at the audience, and said, "Well, Muhammad, I guess your mother never complained about how you turned out." The way he said it made clear he intended it as a compliment wrapped in a joke, a reference to Ali's physical transformation from a Louisville teenager into the greatest athlete on earth. The audience laughed tentatively, looking toward Ali to confirm the tone was safe. Ali did not confirm it. He went still in a way that had nothing performative about it, not the theatrical stillness he sometimes deployed for effect, the showman's pause before a punchline. This was different. This was the stillness of a man who had just heard something touch a place that was not available for touching. Odessa Clay had died 8 months earlier, in February 1975. Ali had been at her bedside. He had held her hand through the final hours and had not spoken publicly about her death in any detailed way in the months since. He had mentioned her in interviews briefly, formally, with a care that any journalist paying attention would have recognized as a boundary. Her absence was the one wound he had not allowed the public near. Eastwood didn't know. There was no reason he would have known. The comment had been genuinely well-intentioned, a clumsy compliment about a mother he had no idea was gone. But Ali didn't know that Eastwood didn't know. The studio went quiet in a way that live television almost never goes quiet. Griffin later described it as the loudest silence he had ever heard on a stage. Camera operators stopped making adjustments. The floor director, who was responsible for keeping the show moving under any circumstances, simply stood still and waited.
Eastwood realized something was wrong within seconds. He could see it happening, but couldn't yet understand what he had triggered. His expression shifted from easy confidence to careful attention, reading the room the way a man reads a room when he senses he has misstepped but not yet identified where. Ali looked at him for a long moment. The audience held its breath collectively, the way audiences do when they sense they are about to witness something they will remember. Then Ali said, very quietly, "My mother passed away this past February." The silence that followed those 7 words was absolute. Eastwood's face changed completely. The Hollywood composure, that famous impassive cool that had translated so perfectly to the screen, fell away in a manner that was almost shocking to witness. What replaced it was something nakedly human, the expression of a man who understood in an instant the full weight of what he had accidentally done.
"Muhammad," Eastwood said, "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry." What Ali did next was the part that nobody in that studio expected, and the part that people talked about for years afterward. He nodded once, slowly, and then he said, "I know you didn't. My mother would have laughed at that joke. She had a better sense of humor than I do." The audience exhaled as one. But Ali wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to a register that was nothing like his public voice, nothing like the Ali who predicted rounds and renamed himself and told the world it was the greatest. This was the voice of a man speaking from somewhere very private. "She used to watch every fight from home," Ali said. "She refused to come to the arena. She said watching me get hit in person would give her a heart attack, so she watched on television with the sound turned down because she didn't want to hear the crowd. Just her and the picture, every fight, sound off." He paused. "I fought Manila for her. She was already sick by then, and I thought about her the whole time. Every round, when it got bad, I thought about her watching that television with the sound turned down." Merv Griffin did not say a word. Eastwood did not say a word. The audience did not make a sound. Ali straightened up. Something shifted back in his expression, not the showman returning exactly, but a man who had said what needed saying and was now ready to continue. "She raised me right," Ali said simply. "That's all." What happened in the remaining 30 minutes of that segment was, by any television standard, remarkable. Eastwood, visibly moved in a way he rarely allowed himself to be in public, began talking about his own mother with an openness that his publicist would later say surprised even the people closest to him. The conversation became something that neither the producers, nor the host, nor the guests had planned or prepared for. It became honest. Merv Griffin said afterward that it was the best television he had ever been part of, and that he had done almost nothing to cause it. Ali had caused it by choosing in one unscripted moment to respond to an accidental wound with something other than anger. Eastwood sought Ali out privately after the taping. What passed between them in that conversation was not reported, and neither man ever detailed it publicly, but witnesses noted that when they emerged from the dressing room corridor 20 minutes later, Eastwood's eyes were red. The two men maintained a quiet mutual respect for the rest of their lives. They were not close friends in any conventional sense, their worlds remained largely separate, but people who knew both of them noted an unusual quality to the regard they showed each other in the years that followed, the kind of regard that comes from having seen something real in another person. Ali was asked about the Merv Griffin night only once in a formal interview years later. The journalist expected a story about restraint, about choosing peace over confrontation, about the discipline that championship fighting teaches a man. Ali gave a different answer entirely. "I wasn't being disciplined. I was just being my mother's son. She would have told me the exact same thing I told him. She would have said, 'He didn't know, baby. Give the man some grace.'" He smiled at the memory. "She was smarter than me about most things," he said.
I was just doing what she taught me.
There is something that gets discussed whenever this story is told, which is the question of what Ali's response cost him in that moment. The honest answer is that it cost him nothing he wasn't willing to give. The more interesting question is what it gave him, what it gave both of them, that neither could have gotten any other way. A man who had every justification for anger chose something else, not because he was suppressing what he felt, but because what he felt, underneath the grief, was something his mother had put there so deeply that it surfaced even in the hardest moments. The belief that grace extended to people who didn't know better was not weakness. It was the most complete form of strength he knew. Odessa Clay had raised a heavyweight champion of the world, but in the green room of a Los Angeles television studio on an October night in 1975, what she had actually raised became visible for a moment to everyone watching. A man who could afford to be small and chose not to be. What people who study this story often miss is the specific texture of what Ali did in the seconds after Eastwood's comment, before he spoke. The stillness that witnesses described was not the stillness of a man calculating his response or managing his anger. People who were in that studio and who were interviewed afterward consistently used a different word. They said he looked like a man who was remembering something. That distinction matters. Calculation is a choice made in the head. Remembering is something that happens in the chest. What the audience saw in those few seconds was not Muhammad Ali deciding how to react to Clint Eastwood. It was Muhammad Ali being pulled back briefly and completely to somewhere else entirely, to a house in Louisville, to a woman watching a television screen with the sound turned down, and then returning. Eastwood gave a rare interview in 2003 in which he was asked about moments in his life that had genuinely changed how he saw things. He gave several expected answers: certain films, certain directors, certain performances he had witnessed. Then he mentioned, almost as an aside, a television appearance from 1975. He did not elaborate at length. He said only that he had met someone that night who showed him something he had not understood before about the relationship between power and restraint. The interviewer, who did not know the Merv Griffin story in detail, moved on to the next question. People who did know the story understood exactly what Eastwood meant. Odessa Clay was 60 years old when she died. She had worked as a domestic for most of her adult life, cleaning houses in Louisville, Kentucky, so that her children could have opportunities she never had. She had watched her son become the most famous person on earth, and done so from the same house she had always lived in, with the television sound turned down, because watching him get hit was more than she could bear. She had also, somewhere in the years of raising him, given him something that no trainer and no cornerman and no manager could have given him, something that showed up not in a boxing ring, but on a couch in a Los Angeles television studio, in the seconds after an accidental wound, in the choice he made about who he wanted to be when being small would have been so much easier. The greatest thing Muhammad Ali ever did in public may not have been in any arena. It may have been on a Tuesday night in October, in front of a live studio audience, when he looked at a man who had accidentally hurt him and decided to respond the way his mother would have wanted. He gave the man some grace. And in doing so, he showed everyone watching what grace from the most powerful man in the world actually looks like. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Have you ever been in a moment where you had every right to respond with anger, but chose grace instead? Tell us in the comments below, and ring that notification bell for more stories about the character behind the greatest legends in history.